everybody, what's up and going on? Optimus Tom here once again with another episode of In the Zone, my little Learn to League of Legends show, and one that I haven't really been able to do for a little bit of time because we've had a bunch of different things going on over at GG Chronicle. Of course, we had the amazing and awesome GG Classic number 2 coming up and on, which fortunately was not around for. I was on vacation for those 2 weeks, so it was some pretty awesome games. Did manage to catch a couple while I was away in Disney, but other than that, we had a couple other things going on, such as like the GG Chronicle crew making their own ranked 5s team, streaming some of their matches, and kind of forgetting about what I did with In the Zone and when the time was because I've been away. So regardless of that, we haven't had an In the Zone for a little while. Wanted to do one last week, but just didn't get a chance to do it about a couple of the qualifiers to the MLG League of Legends Summer Arena, which was actually fantastic, by the way, because it was this past weekend. We had Team Black from Europe, we had Azubu Blaze from Korea, Team Solar Mid, and Curse North America representing the NA side of things, and it was just an awesome, awesome time all around. Myself, Monte Cristo, got to go to the event and cast, and I was actually dedicated observer. Of course, Quickshot, D-Man, and Dan Din on the casting as well. It was a very, very awesome tournament. Many awesome things became of this one. So, In the Zone this week was going to be on basically what Azubu Blaze did and how the teams didn't react and how you can identify what Azubu Blaze had done and how to prepare yourselves against it, because basically what happened was as soon as I jumped into solo queue after the Summer Arena weekend, all of a sudden everybody was pushing lanes down left and right. And it's not necessarily the entire strategy. There's a little bit more tact and poise to it than just running rampant and trying to push towers down left and right and doing a bunch of goofy stuff like that. It starts in the picks and bans. It starts with what champions you're going to be selecting. It starts with picking an overall strategy, and then the pushing kind of comes as I guess I'll say more of a philosophy with it more than what you're actually going to be doing as a complete strategy, because just pushing is never a great idea. If you push a bunch of champions that are just going to wind up pushing towers down, it's not going to work out the same way where if you pick champions that have a certain teamfight capability that you could also use to push towers down. So it's a little bit more of a sub-theme, philosophy, however you want to call it. It's not 100% what Azubu Blaze was going to be doing and everything else. But they did actually come in with a very aggressive push strategy, and you have to really take into account a bunch of different things in order to understand where they're going to be coming from. So, in order to do that, Optimus Tom has done something he hasn't done for a little while on the League of Legends scene with, well, In the Zone, which is going to be, of course, breaking down statistics and looking at a lot of math. Now, courtesy of Leaguepedia. Why do I have this one up here? That's how I'm supposed to be. Hi. Courtesy of Leaguepedia, we of course have all the picks and bans being selected for the entire tournament. So if you guys missed anything and you want to check out the matchups, first off, the VODs are available at MLG.com, or what is it? MLG TV.MajorLeagueGaming.com technically. And they have all the VODs up for free in 720p. Those came out a little bit earlier today. We'll be taking a look at some of the highlights from those in a little bit. But Leaguepedia, just want to give them a quick shout out for, of course, all the dedicated work they did over the weekend, providing us with these picks and bans for every single match. You can even go into team rosters, check out the qualifiers, link to the VODs right here as well, so you guys can check those out. It's just an overview of the entire tournament and how much prize money was getting away, etc., etc., etc. So big props to them. But one of the cool things that they did for me was keep track of these picks and bans. It's allowed me to give you guys some statistics. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can check out right here. This is a graph, actually, for the champions, how often they were picked by Azubu Blaze. This is basically what I like to call a times picked chart. That means that all these champions and all these numbers right here, this is a percentage of how often they were picked in the games that got played. And I'm actually going to open up my Expo a little bit bigger so I can actually see what's going on here too. As you can see, it's based in percentiles. So 45% of the games played, Azubu Blaze had picked Graves, Maokai, or Aurelia. 36% on that time they wound up picking Ryze. Urgot, Nocturne, and Janna clocked in at 27%, and then there were a bunch of champions in at 18 and 9%. Altogether, I believe there are 28 champions on here. So in 11 games of League of Legends, in a best-of-3 setting, this is how often these champions were picked. And this is how many different champions were picked. There were 55 games overall, and basically our 55 games with Azubu Blaze, or over 55 different champion combinations in the games. I'm getting everything confused now. This is just how often these champions were picked depending on how many games there were. So out of the 11 games Azubu Blaze played, this is how often these champions were picked. So they love their Graves, their Maokai, and their Aurelia. On top of all this, we can already start to see, a little bit of dissecting down of what champions they picked and how are they going to kind of put them into different kind of team compositions. Now, something else for you guys to look at is the chance that Azubu Blaze had to pick one of these characters if you're the team facing off against them. This is a percentage of the time that these champions were picked out of all of the games in the tournament that Azubu Blaze played. So this, of course, means that, they played 11 matches, and this is how many champions you could pick out of potential champions that were picked, and this is basically how the math boiled down to it. So 9% of the time, you could have a Graves, Maokai, and Aurelia just picked straight off the bat by Azubu Blaze. This, of course, you kind of figure in, like, okay, let's take a quick look back at the other chart. This is how often they were actually picked. But during the picks and bans phase, that entire mind game, these are the percentage chances that you had of them picking these specific champions. If you look at it, 9% compared to 2% is a heck of a lot, considering that means that you had basically out of the 100 and something champions, we have now 100 champions on the Jace patch for this tournament. 9% out of that 100, you would be seeing a Graves, a Maokai, or an Aurelia pick being used by Azubu Blaze. That means that it makes it extremely difficult to try to ban out a specific champion against them, especially because there's a huge demographic here of 4% chances and then the large 2%, meaning they kept switching up what champions they were using. Just because you banned out Graves doesn't mean that they can't pick something along the more the lines of, say, a Corki or a Sivir even we saw them busting out in this tournament. So there were a lot of different champions that like to play. Maybe even an Urgot who had a 5% chance here. So that is something really, really cool that you had to keep in mind when playing against Azubu Blaze. Something else that Azubu Blaze did very, very well was banning out champions they did not want to play against. Holy crap, did they hate Rumble and Malphite. Out of the number of times that champions were picked for bans, 100% of the time, Rumble was banned out when Azubu Blaze was involved in the game. And these are just Azubu Blaze's bans. This is not the team banning things against Blaze. This is specifically Azubu Blaze picking Rumble every single game to be banned out. They did not want the Yordle in these games. They also did not want to have to put up with Malphite in the top lane. The rest of the bans, targeted bans throughout the competition. Shyvana being targeted at Curse Gaming, Alistar also being targeted at Curse Gaming. Graves being targeted at TSM when TSM thought they could snipe it away from Azubu Blaze. Karthus and Nocturne also targeted bans at both TSM and Curse. Yorick and Shen. Shen became a ban that they used last, especially when they weren't going to secure it for themselves for that specific team composition. And Yorick was a specific ban targeted at Dyrus the entire tournament. So Azubu Blaze knew exactly what champions they wanted to ban. The last chart I have is a percent chance that Azubu Blaze would ban their champions. When you look at it, there's a 1 in 5 chance that they were going to ban Rumble every single game, and they did ban him every single game. 16% that they do Malphite, and then it goes down to more specific targeted bans at different players throughout the course of the tournament. So what does this mean? Well, this means that Azubu Blaze is banning out very, very well against the competition that they're going to be prepared to face off against. So on the Jace patch, Rumble still hadn't received those little bit of nerfs to his Flame Spitter, so he was still dealing a lot of damage, and he, of course, had the positioning thing that was, making him deal a little bit too much damage. So Rumble was being a very heavily targeted ban from Azubu Blaze the entire tournament. Malphite, of course, still had the extra damage on his E to be dealing a little bit of extra AoE damage. I believe the thing was still, and it was basically still the way too high percentage for these teams to want to be dealing with. So banning out Malphite almost every single game was also something Azubu Blaze did. This let Azubu Blaze identify the two champions they were going to have a very difficult time with in the tournament, and then left that last ban to be used as a tactical mind game advantage, where, you'd be like, well, are you going to pick Graves or Shen? If not, we're going to ban it out because we're not going to have first pick, or we're not going to ban it out because we have first pick and force you to ban it so we don't have to play against it. It also let them go into a game against an opponent that maybe they weren't as studied up on, such as Black, such as Curse. They were obviously studying very heavily for TSM. When we first arrived the first day, Blaze is basically saying that they had been watching film from TSM since they landed, and when we first got into the studios on Friday, even though they weren't playing TSM until 8 o'clock, Azubu got there at basically noon or 1 o'clock, at whatever time after the players' lunch, sat down and began talking with TSM, watching TSM at the MLG Anaheim finals and trying to find trends in their play there, and they had that last slot to ban out specifically against TSM. I'm just going to be taking a quick look over here at the bans. In the first game, the bans involved Nocturne, and then the second game they banned out Graves, and then in the third game that last ban was Yorick. So you could see their philosophy already of we don't want Odd One getting Nocturne, we don't want Dyrus having Yorick. There was no mention of Kale in here, and a couple times it did take away or ban out Karthus from Reginald or from Nijaki on Curse Gaming. So one thing that Azubu Blaze did very, very well was their homework. They studied up on everybody and basically took it to them. In a pre-arena interview that we did with Dyrus and Odd One, I was talking to them and asking them, like, who you want to play. Obviously, everyone was like, oh, we want to play Blaze. Have you studied up on them? And Dyrus and Odd One were kind of like, well, we watched a couple of their games. We didn't really do a lot of research. Chaos comes over and goes, well, Chaos, myself, and Xpecial done a lot of research on all these games, and like we're going to be able to call them. We're going to have their number, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But they don't have the same kind of research that Azubu Blaze did as a team. So instead of having, you know, the entire team of Azubu Blaze knowing what TSM was going to do and knowing how each position was going to react, TSM basically had Chaos and Xpecial trying to dictate what their strategy was and what they were going to do, rather than the whole team being on the same page, and it kind of hurt TSM when we got into the tournament. But aside from these mind games that picks and bans and everything, a lot of people are saying, oh, Azubu Blaze is using such a different far-fetched strategy. We've never seen this out of the North American teams, anything like this going on at all. Not quite. See, a lot of what Azubu Blaze was doing was this very aggressive tower push strategy, and a lot of people are saying, oh, well, the champion choices are kind of interesting. Well, that's where I kind of got to shut you guys down, because they're not as interesting as you may think. What we have here is a little graphic that I could demonstrate that through the statistics, this was the most average team we saw from Azubu Blaze. People, of course, are going to be arguing with me, Optimus Tom, they didn't play this exact team, it's blah, 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 blah. No, but if you were to change one or two things about this team, you could all of a sudden see how Azubu Blaze adapted to fit different play styles. But if you were to go into a solo queue game, and for some reason like a ranked 5s, and Blaze were to be trying to pick champions, statistically, this is who you would probably be facing off with. We'd have Aurelia in the top lane, Maokai in the jungle, Ryze in the mid lane, and we had Graves and Janna on the bottom, or on the top, depending on if they did a lane swap. So statistically, this looks like a typical composition that we always see out of basically every team when they get down and serious in a tournament. Ryze is a very safe pick in the mid lane. He also has a very strong late game because he is super tanky. Aurelia, well, everybody's always complaining you better nerf Aurelia. That champion in the top lane, she's very hard to move, and when you wind up getting a Fade, or perhaps going for a Randuin's Omen on here and getting that Warden's Mail, a very important item that we might be able to discuss a little bit later on in the show, she's basically an unmovable force, and she's going to sit up there and farm. Once she hits that late game carry Aurelia stage, she is a devastating force to be facing off against. Graves and Janna on the bottom lane. We've seen Chaos and Xpecial run lanes like this all the time. Sometimes they swap out Graves for Ashe. Sometimes they swap out Janna for Soraka. Doesn't matter. This lane is very similar to something we've seen out of some North American teams. And then Maokai in the jungle, of course, everybody knows Odd One for innovating his jungle Maokai and using it to a lot of good effect. So Helios wound up taking Maokai into the jungle. And very interestingly enough, you can see it has some points above their heads just to get a little bit of notation of everything. We'll start with Helios the jungler. When we were going into the arena, he had a lot of comparison to the jungle style of St. Vicious. But when he was actually in the game, we saw a lot of the Odd One in his Maokai playstyle, as if he watched Odd One's game and tried to mimic it, but improve on it as well. We even saw the Boots of Mobility first, then GP10 item build Maokai busting out to get really early ganks off, like level 3 gang, get the boots, get the pieces for the GP10 if we have enough, and then immediately go back into the lane and try ganking again after maybe taking Wraiths or Wolves or a small camp. So Maokai was a very aggressive jungle ganker for Azubu Blaze this tournament. Ambition was a really, really nice pickup for Rise. He diversified the most out of anyone on the team. He had 7 unique solo mid choices, whether it was going to be his Rise. We did have him also with the double threat between him and Reaper to playing Vladimir in the top or mid lane. He did wind up picking up an Ahri for a game or two. We also had him playing Twisted Fate, took that one away from Reginald and basically showed him how to play it. We had stealing away Karthus from both Reginald and Nijaki. And on top of this, Orianna and Cassidon were also added to his repertoire of champions. So he had a very diverse set of champions, which made the other teams a little uncomfortable, basically thinking, how can we counterpick this guy? We could assume he's going to pick something, but then he winds up picking something else, and we're going to be in a little bit of trouble. So Ambition brought a lot of diversity to the mid lane matchup, and made it very, very hard for teams to get accustomed to trying to counteract one player specifically. This is something that a lot of the North American teams will still have a little bit of trouble with, which is trying to get your mastery down with like 3 or 4 champions so you can't effectively get banned out and forced to play someone you're a little less than good with, especially in high-level tournament play. This is something, of course, that had plagued Dyrus for a little while before he wound up getting his repertoire back on track. You would ban out Singed and Jax against Dyrus, and you basically had no one else to play except for maybe Kayle. Nowadays, we see him playing Malphite, we see him playing Singed. He, of course, still has his repertoire of Jax. He has an Olaf matchup that's pretty nasty, Kayle, etc., etc. These players are starting to get more and more champions to their name, and you have to avoid being banned out. If you were TSM or Curse or Block and you went into a matchup and you wanted to shut down Ambition, you had to ban out Vladimir because it was super, super important that he or Reaper did not get that champion. You would have had to ban out, say, an Ahri or Rise or another mid choice, and boom, already you've wasted 2 bans on a potential mid lane matchup, which means you only have 1 more ban for the jungle or perhaps the top lane, and you're not going to be able to counteract that effectively. So having a diverse amount of champions, especially in the mid lane matchup, is absolutely, absolutely key, and no one did it better than Blaze's Ambition. Lustboy in the top lane loved running teleport. We actually saw a lot of teleport this tournament. Dyrus was running it on his Yorick. We saw Pobelter running it on Yorick and AP solo top Janna, which is interesting enough in and of itself. But teleport on Aurelia was devastating because Aurelia would just sit up there and farm, never have to leave lane. She had Heaton style most of the time against TSM especially. Aurelia was matched up against Yorick because Yorick couldn't apply enough pressure to kill Aurelia, especially in the pre-level 6 phase where Yorick is a little bit stronger over champions like Vladimir in that top lane. Aurelia just had a little too much sustain through her Heaton style, so he was not able to effectively harass her out of lane, and she would just farm and be safe, hit her ultimate, farm up, keep up in farm with even Yorick, and then teleport into a ward in bot lane or river or mid lane and just wreak havoc on the team because all of a sudden, boom, there was an Aurelia, and Yorick wasn't applying enough pressure and had no way to stop her from teleporting, where she would just automatically join the fray. So people like Dyrus and Pobelter also had to run teleport because they weren't being able to go for kills in that top lane. They had to go for overall presence on the map. In addition to this, we had lane swaps being a very, very difficult issue for some of the North American teams to deal with, which we'll take a look at in just a second with a video example from one of the games between Azubu and TSM. But lane swaps, as well as many different AD character choices or support character choices, meant that Captain Jack and Lustboy had to click with each other on multiple champions. This means that you're not only going to have to know how to play Graves with a Janna or a Soraka, but a Lulu or a Taric as well. You're not going to have to only know how to play a Janna with a Graves, but know how to play it with a Corki or an Ezreal as well. So there are a lot of different matchups that they could have thrown at people. Graves, of course, being one of the more popular because that's Captain Jack's go-to character. But then we also saw Captain Jack picking up an Urgot to, what was it, like a... He played it 27% of the time in the games that they were able to pick it up, or in the games that it wasn't banned out. So there was a very high percentage of him playing Urgot as well. And Urgot and Graves have very different play styles, and you can't necessarily pick the same support character to go with those 2 champions because it just doesn't work out all the time. So we had Captain Jack picking up Graves 45% of the time, same amount that Reaper loved playing Aurelia in that top lane. Helios with Maokai, same thing, 45% of the time he could take it, he snatched it up. Ambition with 36% on Rise, a little bit lower because you like to diversify, but Rise is the one he picked the most this tournament. And Lustboy had Janna at 27% of the games because he did like favoring something along the lines of a Lulu or something else very, very interesting that we did see coming out from Azubu Blaze this tournament. So they had a lot of different things up their sleeves, but when it just really boiled down to it, a lot of the stuff they excelled upon were mechanics. They didn't really innovate everything except for maybe that really awesome play that are in the MLG top 10 highlights right now, where Shyvana engages the team and Lulu pops up the wild growth the exact moment Shyvana lands, and it knocks everybody up in the middle of TSM and just completely, or is it TSM or Curse? I forget, but it completely devastates them, and it winds up making a very difficult team fight for them, and it was absolutely insane. So aside from that, what you did see with Curse wound up using the Shyvana and the Orianna with the command protect, putting the ball on Shyvana. Shyvana goes in, drags everybody apart. Orianna brings him back in, hits the dissonance button. Shyvana hits the E, and then there's a little bit of AoE damage in there to take everybody down. But they showed ridiculous versatility, and that was basically one of the things that made it very, very hard to play against them, because they were constantly picking different champions and running different strategies. You know, it wasn't too far-fetched where they were like, oh, okay, well, they didn't pick a comp that just pushed down towers. That's what I'm trying to get the point across. As you saw before, when we go back to what champions they played the most, this is just a standard kind of composition. What they did do sometimes, you know, they went for a gank-heavy composition. Ryze's Rune Prison on top of Maokai with his Twisted Advance, devastating. Equilibrium Strike is a very useful tool in top lane ganks as well. And then Smokescreen and all the CC from Janna is absolutely ridiculous as well. So this is more of a safe kind of protection comp with a little aggression coming out from, obviously, like I said, the Maokai ganks with Twisted Advance and the possibility of a lot of damage in the mid lane. Something they focused heavily on against TSM was abusing the aggressive nature of Reginald. Compositions like Ryze and Maokai took ridiculous advantage of that and put Reginald on the back foot when he tried playing champions he's not necessarily as familiar with, such as Twisted Fate. So this is something that that Azubu really, really focused on and just really did well. We also saw them switching up their jungler to Nocturne, having a Jax and having a Kassadin, and going for more of a dive composition. Something where they're going to really assassinate or isolate specific champions while picking up a tanky DPS like an Urgot and going for, say, a Lulu or a Taric support to buff the armor and give a little bit extra crowd control where they really, really needed it. On top of things like this, just, you know, let me just go back to the graph really quick. This graph. We can see here, what else did they pick up? Let's see, there is Nocturne. There's Vladimir being played a lot for a sustained comp, double AP, running Vladimir in the top lane, and someone like, say, a Ryze or perhaps even a Karthus in the mid lane to really counteract that. Soraka is being picked up a lot too with Urgot because he'd be able to spam a lot of his more spells that way. They just had so much versatility in their picks that it made it very difficult for the other teams to deal with. And that is one thing that Azubu Blaze did to really capitalize on things. Another thing that they really did well was swapping up the lanes. We talked about this just a little bit right now. I'm going to go back to the map again because I'm proud of how I made this graphic. But this bottom lane and this top lane weren't always the kind of thing that they did. It's not a very new idea, but they did it so aggressively and so effectively that they came out on top because of this. You know, Alex Ich had the C minion kill, or C hero kill hero, C champion kill champion. TSM play more like C champion kill minion. Ha! Well, Azubu Blaze kind of looked like C minion, C champion, kill tower. They pushed these advantageous lanes all the way through, and then not just swapped up the lanes, but 3- and 4-man pushed and pressured. So there's actually a replay I'm going to show you very quickly from, this is the third game between TSM and Azubu Blaze. Of course, once again, guys, check out Major League Gaming, tv.majorleaguegaming.com. All these 720p VODs are free. Talked to Anton, said he was okay for me to use them, which is why I'm going to be doing this for you, ladies and gentlemen. But you should obviously go and check out the full VODs for all the games. It was a ridiculous series of events. But you can see here, if it wants to load for me. This is a little embarrassing. Guess I'm going to have to refresh the page. And there we go. All right, so it's about 3 minutes and 50 seconds in. So that's 327. I guess it's only going to let me go to 327. But what I'm going to show you is an example of how they pressed the advantage in these lanes once they had the swap. You could see, is this the right game? No, this is game number 1. I want to go to game number 3, actually. Sorry, guys. I had the VOD loaded up, but just decided not to load for me at that specific point in time. So 3 minutes, 48 seconds. Okay. So what we have here is a lane swap, and just look at this down here. I'm just going to pause it really quick. Look at how devastated Dyrus is in a 2 versus 1 matchup as Vladimir. I'm waiting for the little MLG thing. There we go. Okay. Dyrus currently has 6 CS. That's 6 kills. Graves has 16, and then Corki in the top lane and the 2v1 up there has 20. But Dyrus is miserable. Look at how low his tower is. He is just getting pushed to hell. Look at all this. All these minions trickling in. Dyrus right here, just continuously bashing down the turret. That is all they are doing. Like, okay, a little harasser and glitter lands on Dyrus and back off so the tower doesn't hit them. Azubu was doing really good with this little dancing back and forth the entire tournament, but it was absolutely insane how quickly they were pushing down towers. This, once again, is that aggression we saw on Reginald out in the mid lane. He overextends on a champion like Twisted Fate. Maokai comes in and ganks the mid lane. I don't know how many times we've seen TSM do that themselves, but Reginald just kept falling for it all tournament. I'm going to probably just wait out a couple seconds because it will be in like another 10 seconds. Look at how low the tower is. Look at Dyrus. He's level 3. He has 11 CS. He is doing technically better than Aurelia in CS in this top lane, but he wasn't prepared for it. He went boots and potions first. Aurelia went into the lane with cloth armor and 5 health potions. Now look at Dyrus. Pushed all the way back to his tower. The tower goes down 4 minutes and 21 seconds into the game. That is how quickly and how forcefully they were pushing down these towers. Now if we actually accelerate just a couple more seconds into the future, we'll see that. Look at the bottom here. Graze and Lulu, wow, I'm a really good observer. Graze and Lulu kill their lane, go back to buy, and immediately start going to the top. The jungler comes in from the side and ganks the top lane. They force the top lane to burn their summoner spells. They're forcing them to get out of the lane or die. Special falls to Helios with a double buff on. Helios comes back, and now Reaper up here, just going to go back and recall. Not only is he going to buy, he is going to go back, buy, and go into the bot lane to combat Dyrus. Why? Because Shyvana is still here, and coming up the lane are Graves and Lulu. This is a lane swap with a lot more pushing power. They net a kill on the 1v2. The one is left up there by himself, like, oh, I'm just going to farm, this is going to be easy. Oh, crap, not only did they switch lanes, the jungler is still here. I'm backed up to my tower. I'm level 4. I can't do anything against 3 other level 4 champions. And now we're going to just do the dance over here. Oddone's going to come and try to help me. We're going to get a lot of damage put onto TSM, and we're going to use our abilities to run away. Speaking of, we've also used our abilities to take about a quarter of the HP off the tower, and this is just a minute and 20 seconds after we push down a tower in your bottom lane. Now, Odd One is losing time in his jungle. Reginald in the mid lane is having a little bit of trouble going back and forth. So it's just very difficult, you know, for the team to wind up reacting. Just gotta be like, what is going on? How is this happening? And now Dyrus is gonna be like, okay, well, we want to keep our advantage on our Corki. We're gonna have to 2v1 in the top lane now, and now that top tower is going to go down. And this is actually a play that was also in the MLG highlights here, where Ambition teleports away. I mixed up the things before. Odd One's Maokai came in here and ganked with Gragas for Reginald, picked up a kill in Ambition. They were doing the same exact thing to TSM all weekend. So TSM and Azubu, you could see, have that mid lane matchup just kind of studied out. Now look at this top tower, way below half health. Vladimir looks to be in all sorts of hurt, and Dyrus, unfortunately, just really can't do anything about this constant pressure from that top lane and from that bottom lane. So not only were they just pushing down towers, but they were moving as a group and doing it super effectively. They were ganking, netting themselves an advantage, and then taking that advantage and pushing it all the way forward, making TSM react and go up there, and then just already planning out that Aurelia was going to go on to bottom lane, pulling Dyrus back up into the top lane and try to get the lane swap down for TSM. Chaos and Xpecial had died or had to go back, and Aurelia is already in the bottom lane, sustaining her farm back up and to surpass that of Dyrus, while Dyrus is up top trying to defend against another tower that is as doomed as his bottom tower was. So one step ahead of their decision making and one step ahead of the aggression is something that was very interesting to see out of Azubu Blaze in this tournament. On top of this, they were doing something else very interesting, which was using boots of mobility on their junglers and support characters. This is something that they let positioning come into play just a few seconds earlier, and it wound up being something that worked out extremely well for them. It's going to be another one that doesn't play for me. Come on. I guess all my preloaded VODs are not going to play for me. So we have TSM and Azubu game number 1. Thankfully, I've written down timers. So we do have 14:28. But this is something else. Even though TSM here is being the aggressive ones, look at this. Nunu coming out of the jungle, Twisted Fate with a gold card. Maokai is not far behind to come in with a Twisted Advance and land it on Reginald. All of a sudden, the aggression turns right back around. They pick up first blood. This is what I was talking about from the last VOD before I got the two of them mixed up. But they're constantly applying this pressure and getting these ganks down on the mid lane that TSM has been known to do and known to be, super, super aggressive with. Blaze just doing it a little bit better. And now here, 17-15, same thing. Maokai getting a little bit closer because he has these boots of mobility coming in and turning yet another gank completely around for TSM. And of course, you know, the game lagged at that point, and that looked really, really bad. But still, they have this aggression out of the jungle. They have this boots of mobility first kind of mentality, something that we've seen Oddone doing a lot more. And even though TSM kind of pioneered this on the North American scene, Korean teams like Azubu Blaze comes in and uses it, all of a sudden TSM's just walking into it blindly. They're like, what do we do? Like, well, you know, like that's our strategy. How come they're using it against us? Like, how do we react? And because they weren't able to adapt in-game as quickly as Azubu Blaze was, they wound up losing out for it. And this is something else I wanted to really key in on here. Azubu Blaze were patient, and they adapted beautifully to whatever the teams threw at them. One of the things I'm going to have to look at, obviously, is, well, I had to refresh the VOD once again, so let me pull that up for you guys. In the Azubu against Black games, Azubu and Black had no idea, like, basically what one another were going to be throwing at them. I believe this is the right VOD. 25-25 is what I'm going to be looking for. 25:07. Okay, so this should probably be what it is. Let's see here. No, this is not the right VOD. What VOD was it then? Could have sworn it was that VOD. Oh well, but I'll just have to talk to you guys about it instead. But basically what happens is Azubu is pushing a lane on the bottom lane against Black or TSM, one of the two. Probably TSM. But they're pushing a bottom lane, and they have complete map vision on the left side. They don't have vision of TSM behind their tower on the bottom lane. Azubu is on the blue side, TSM is on the purple side. Actually, I can bring this up for you. So we are somewhere around this second tower right here. Azubu's filtering in here, poking and prodding. You guys really can't see, but can I draw on here? Oh man, that'd be awesome if I could draw on here. Oh, I can't draw on here. That sucks. But okay, let me put something on here so you guys can see. Pictures. Awesome. So, whoa, I didn't realize I could do that. So anyway, what we have is Azubu is in this area over here. What they are doing is walking around towards this brush, poking and prodding over by this tower. What it means is TSM is back here. They have a Corki on their side. They have a couple different champions that are pretty good at poking, so they take a bit of damage, deal a lot of damage back, and Azubu decides to retreat around here, check out the blue buff, and then retreat to this tri-brush. And they know that something is going to happen because TSM is grouped up when they're back against this tower. So they take a little bit of chip damage, send their hurt ally back, and try to push out this tower a little bit. So they push out to about here. Chaos fires a rocket from Corki into the brush over here. Azubu dodges it by going left and going bottom, and then spring into action by diving down on Chaos. I think they had a Nocturne or someone else. They're just able to really just dive down on Chaos. Chaos has to Valkyrie out of there immediately. The other two champions stuck with him are all of a sudden basically in a 2 versus 4 or 2 versus 5, and they just melt down almost instantly. So it was a very, very calculated and patient play from Azubu Blaze that wound up netting them something extremely, extremely awesome out of it. Another play that we're going to be looking at really quick is Azubu against Black. Now, Azubu against Black was an interesting matchup because Azubu knew nothing about Black. Black didn't know too much about Azubu, and for some reason, the MLG website is not loading for me. But anyway, we had Curse, we had, Curse and TSM that they had known about, but Black came up through the qualifiers and was relatively unknown. So Azubu felt a little uncomfortable going in against them, wanted some replays on them, but we actually had none, so like they couldn't get anything on replay. They couldn't really get anything to watch about them. So after game 1, where they saw them coming out with a very aggressive play style, Sven Skaren was there subbing in, playing Lee Sin, very aggressive counter jungling, early level ganks. They knew what kind of aggression that Black was going to throw at them, and they adapted brilliantly from level 1. And they combated exactly what Black wanted to do, which was go for an invade, and they defend brilliantly. Look at this. They have their main characters split up. So even though when Black gets in this bush, they're going to have to decide which way they're going. Immediately, they go in for Jax, who did not pick up a skill until he gets poked and prodded in the bush. This lets them eat a volley to the face. This lets them eat lay waste. This lets them eat all this damage coming down, and Jax just leaps to safety, barely taking a scratch in the fight. This lets him go off. They decide to walk after Captain Jack and his patented cleanse. Cleansing a Morgana Dark Binding, she falls to her death. Now it's a 4 versus 5, and Black is scrambling to make something happen. Alvic will flash forward and wind up picking up a kill on Karthus, but Jack sets himself a double kill. The Ashe actually takes away a kill here from Jax, would have net himself a triple kill, and then taking teleport, Reaper does one of the most awesome plays I've seen in League of Legends for a while. He wants to be denied. Teleport, jump in, and Reaper picks up the kill on to Alvic. It was insane. It was awesome to spectate. It was ridiculous. And Black picked up these spells, picked up these champions after 1 game of playing against Black. They identified what Black could do, and they shut them down because of it. Another thing that they did, which was absolutely awesome, and it's probably not going to play either. Yep. Video you're trying to watch is currently unavailable. But I want to watch it now.
Welcome back to Major League Gaming, Summer Arena for League of Legends. I'm Monte Cristo.
Why won't the mute button work? Technical difficulties with the MLG stuff, ladies and gentlemen. A little unfortunate, but there we go. Going forward to about the 6-minute and 40-something second mark, this is something else they did against Curse Gaming. Now, Curse, as I mentioned, they had the Orianna and the Shyvana combo. But wait, this is Azubu. So game 1... they play against Curse and see what they're up to. Game 2, they steal Curse's idea away from them, and they add the Lulu ultimate into this engagement, which makes for a ridiculously deadly combo, which I actually have in the same game. Where is it? It's a little bit further than this, actually. It's about 32, 37. But what we do have is Curse going for a Baron attempt, and then they, thinking that he was not going to be there, teleport comes in, they knock up Shyvana with the ball on her. There's the ult, there's the ball, there's another ult, and look at the devastation it causes for Curse. Curse had just took down Baron. They thought they had positioning because they separated, and Azubu just picks them apart with a picture-perfect ult combo. Paul Belter with a nice little flash and picking up a kill there on Lulu after everything is done, said and done with, but still, adapting to what Curse was doing and just being absolutely insane with it. Knowing how to play another team's composition after 1 game of seeing it being played, or maybe 2 games if you count the Curse versus Black games as well. But it was absolutely insane just to see how adaptive that Azubu Blaze was in this entire weekend. And one more thing that they did, one more very awesome thing, was in team fights, basically their presence and their footsies, to take a term from the fighting game community, their footsies were impeccable. They had fights where they would go back and forth. And you know how you and a buddy will be playing League of Legends and you go up to a tower and one person draws aggro and you back off and hits the other person instead, and you dance back and forth and the tower winds up hitting you like 1 or 2 less times and then you take less damage because of it. Well, if you don't, well, that's why you should watch the In The Zone shows, because I'll show you how to do stuff like that. But also, Azubu Blaze is doing something really awesome with their team fight mechanics, where they were actually doing this with enemy teams. So it was really cool. What they would do is get into an engagement and do what they needed to. Here they have an aggressive Leona support. Here, there's the Ryze and the Urgot pick and Olaf coming in from behind. Black thinks they have a really good engagement. They wind up taking down Leona. They pop a Galio ultimate and everything. Captain Jack is tanking, taking a lot of damage. Now they're going to try to go on to Reaper right here. Ambition's running in there, dealing damage. Goes back, pops the Paranoia to deny vision to Caitlyn. Keeps Reaper alive. Now Nocturne's taking the brunt of the damage. Meanwhile, Rise is dealing as much damage as possible to that Jax. Nocturne takes a lot of damage. Olaf with no HP comes back in. There's the footsies back and forth. Meanwhile, Reaper, Ambition actually, the mid lane here, Rise, is left relatively untouched. And what looked to be a great engagement for Black turns into a 5-for-1 situation in favor of Azubu Blaze. And that is the kind of mechanics that they had over the competition. They were doing ridiculous amounts of footsies. They were doing ridiculous communication. One more thing they did was every single time an amazing play like that was made, you could listen in to the Dr. Pepper stream and have the TeamSpeak servers up. And even if you didn't understand Korean, they were talking about things. They were saying each other's names and champion names. They were pinging all over the place. Something that as an observer was a really cool thing. They were just pinging constantly. And then they would react. And that was it. There's a top play where Curse is chasing a Shen down from the top lane, and Pobelch is wailing away with undertows. Hits one and decide to keep the chain combo going up. They run into a Karthus and a Maokai in a bush that had just been sitting there. And if you take back a look back, one of the John Madden NOS replay analysis that we did together was he went up there and described the situation, looked at where Karthus went. As soon as Shen ran down from the top lane, Karthus went up. He even reacted early. Not just impeccably, but early, and waited in that bush. Waited for Maokai, and they got a successful counter gank off and just decimated the competition. So Azubu Blaze came in, not only being a very fearful team because they have just ridiculously good players, they have insanely solid mechanics, they have the versatility, and they have the strategy to come in and take down almost any other top team in the world right now. We haven't really seen anything out of teams like this since Moscow 5 did it to TSM at Kiev. And basically when TSM got knocked out of the group stages in CBIT. It was insanely awesome. It was calculated, and it was the high professional level League of Legends that we're going to be seeing now that Riot has announced basically the amazing, awesome things to be packaged in Season 3. I'm not going to go in too much of a rant about that because it's already getting a little bit late for In The Zone. Actually going to be maybe like 5 more minutes left, but still. Going to be wrapping it up relatively on time tonight so I can get a drink and then potentially cast some of the GG Chronicle Ranked 5 team games. They're going to be going off against you fans. I know Ponophobia mentioned it to me. Hopefully he mentioned it to the Facebook and Twitter pages as well, because you guys are going to have a chance to take on some of the GG Chronicle staff casted by myself. It's going to be a really, really awesome experience. But ladies and gentlemen, hopefully you've identified what Azubu Blaze can do, how they did it, and now it's really going to be up to the teams to figure out what they can do. I've been going back and forth with Holy Spork, who's written the team competition articles. I've been going back and forth since the tournament days with Dan Din, where we were talking about how people can react to this one. And what a general consensus is going to be is you need someone strong enough to survive their early game aggression and turn their early game aggression when they lose out on it. Hit that mid-game stride where you could pop down something like an AoE composition, or maybe even an assassination composition with a little bit of tanky backup, like a Maokai jungler or a Nautilus jungler, which Nautilus just disappeared off the face of the earth for this tournament. St. Vicious played him once, and that was basically it. Nautilus, I think, would have been super, super key for these matchups. If you didn't lose out to a level 1 fight, if you had strong enough CC to scare Azubu or better mechanics to fight Azubu at level 1, Nautilus would have been insane for these mid-game turnaround points because of all the crowd control he had. Alistar was another really great jungle pick we saw St. Vicious doing in their only victory against Azubu the entire weekend. None of the teams beat Azubu except for Curse, who beat them one game on the back of a very well-played Blitzcrank support and a very well-played jungle Alistar from St. Vicious. So there are ways to get them out of this composition, being as aggressive on the map but still having a stronger mid-game where they start to fall off just a teeny tiny bit if you don't let them snowball super high advantages was crucial for these compositions, and it's something that other teams are going to have to identify and try to dissect and pick apart Azubu Blaze's strategy, because if you don't, the tower pushing what TSM was trying to do, they had the right idea, but Azubu had it more practiced, more refined, and better mechanics, and they couldn't take it away from them. They tried to go even with it. And in the game number 2 or 1.5 of the finals, we got robbed of due to technical difficulties. They were doing it to a lot of effect. But still, Azubu Blaze is kind of coming out ahead once we got to the team fight phase because of their better mechanics that we talked about. Basically, everything they had was just a step above the other teams in the competition. So they're going to have to refine those skills a little bit, come up with strategies that will absolutely stomp this kind of aggressive push strategy from Azubu Blaze, and identify what their team comps are, rather than trying to counteract the actual tower pushing strategy. Because like I said, it's more of a League of Legends philosophy that any competition can do, and it's not just something along the lines that say one specific team composition that Azubu is going to have to try to pick, you can maybe ban out, is going to be able to do. So when teams get those mind games and get the discipline to do stuff like that, then we're going to see them really taking the fight to Azubu Blaze. And one of the teams we could potentially see doing that is going to be CLG North America, guys. We could see them coming in and taking on Azubu Blaze in the semifinals of the OGN Summer League of Legends Championship Tournament. But they got to get through their sister team of Azubu Frost first. That game is going to be going on tomorrow, tomorrow evening / Friday afternoon for Korea. It's a Friday for Korea at about 6 o'clock in the afternoon, which means about 6 a.m. Friday morning on the East Coast over here for you ladies and gentlemen that are just like me. But guys, we're going to have to see, can CLG beat Frost and then take it to Blaze and apply what teams like TSM, Black, and Curse have learned after this weekend? Or are they going to try some different kind of composition and maybe just halt to the aggression of Azubu? We really don't know. CLG loves playing poke compositions, and I think it might be interesting enough to go against Azubu late game, but early game, it could absolutely get decimated. So you got a little analysis in front of you. I can't exactly break everything down for you guys because I am not the most mechanically sound player in the realm of League of Legends, but hopefully some of you guys out there can identify the little bit sloppy versions you guys will see in the solo queue games or the North American teams. You can identify what they're trying to do to combat it and just keep it in your own memory banks. But that's it for this week's episode of League of Legends, guys. Episode 32. Hope you guys enjoyed it. My name is Optimus Tom. You can always find me right here on the live stream at GG Chronicle or ggchronicle.com, in addition to following us on Twitter at GG Chronicle or at Optimus Tom. I also have a couple of websites you guys can find me at of my own, so it's my own personal YouTube or Facebook page if you guys want to sit down and ask me a question. I've had user questions actually be turned into entire shows of In The Zone before. So if you guys just tuning in, you want questions answered, you want me to analyze something for you, you know how much I love doing math now, ladies and gentlemen. So tune in to next week's episode. No idea what it's going to be yet, but I know it's going to be a good one. Episode 33 will be right back here live on the GG Chronicle live stream channel, 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So ladies and gentlemen, get out there and set the trails ablaze, and I will see you on the fields of justice.
Maybe that's why you're all talk, no action.